Leo was the quietest kid at school, the one nobody noticed until the day $5,000 vanished from the prom fund and suddenly everyone was calling my son a thief. I remember the exact moment everything changed. It was a Tuesday afternoon, unseasonably cold for April, and I was folding laundry in the living room when my phone rang. The school's number flashed on the screen, and my stomach dropped the way it always does when you're a parent and the school calls unexpectedly. You immediately run through a mental checklist of possibilities, most of them bad. Mrs. Patterson, this is Principal Hendricks. I need you to come to the school immediately. There's been a serious incident involving Leo. My hands went numb. Is he hurt? What happened? He's not hurt, but this is a matter we need to discuss in person. As soon as possible, please. The drive to Jefferson High felt like it took hours, though it was only 12 minutes. I kept trying to imagine what could warrant that tone in the principal's voice, that careful blend of authority and something else I couldn't quite identify. Anger? Disappointment? I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. When I arrived, they led me to the principal's office through hallways that felt too quiet, too empty. Leo was already there, sitting in one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs they keep for students in trouble. His shoulders were hunched forward, his hands clasped between his knees, and he wouldn't look at me. That's when I knew something was terribly wrong. Leo always looked at me. Even when he was little and had done something he knew would get him in trouble, he'd look at me with those big brown eyes that were exactly like his father's. Principal Hendricks didn't waste time with pleasantries. Mrs. Patterson, $5,000 is missing from the prom committee fund. Leo was the last person with access to it. The words seemed to come from very far away. I'm sorry, what? The money was counted and locked in the activities office on Friday afternoon. Leo was responsible for that task as the committee treasurer. When Mrs. Chun, the faculty advisor, opened the office on Monday morning, the lockbox was empty. Leo has a key. He was the only student with access over the weekend. I looked at my son. His face had gone completely pale, and there were tears tracking silently down his cheeks. Now, I didn't take it, Mom. His voice was barely a whisper. I swear I didn't take it, and I believed him. Not because I'm a naive mother who thinks her child can do no wrong. Leo had gotten in trouble before. Small things, normal teenage stuff. He'd lied about finishing homework, about where he was going with friends, about whether he'd cleaned his room. And every single time, I could see it in his face, in a way he couldn't quite meet my eyes in the defensive set of his jaw. This wasn't that. This was pure, terrified honesty. But Principal Hendricks had already made up his mind. I'm suspending Leo effective immediately, pending a full investigation. If the money isn't returned by the end of the week, we'll be filing charges with the police and recommending expulsion. You can't just assume he took it, I protested. What about security cameras? What about other people who had access? The security system was down for maintenance over the weekend, and Leo was the only student with a key. The evidence is fairly conclusive, Mrs. Patterson. Evidence? What evidence? The absence of money isn't evidence that my son took it. You need to actually investigate this properly. But I could see in his face that he wasn't going to. Leo was quiet, awkward, didn't play sports, didn't have a large friend group. He was easy to blame, easy to make an example of. The school could close the case quickly, recover their reputation, and move on. One quiet kid's future was a small price to pay for administrative convenience. We drove home in silence. Leo stared out the window, tears still falling, and I didn't know what to say. What do you tell your child when the world has decided he's guilty without proof? When the institution that's supposed to protect him has thrown him to the wolves? By that evening, the news had spread through the school like wildfire. Leo's phone started buzzing before we even got home, and it didn't stop. Text messages, social media notifications, comments on posts he'd made weeks ago. The cruelty was breathtaking. Knew you were a loser, but didn't know you were a thief too. Hope you enjoyed Juvie, freak. My sister worked all year on prom committee, and you ruined it. You're disgusting. The messages got worse from there. Much worse. Kids who had never spoken to Leo, who probably couldn't have picked him out of lineup a week ago, suddenly had detailed opinions about his character, his family, his worth as a human being. They called him names I won't repeat. They made threats. They posted his picture with the word thief written across it in red letters. I watched my son crumble. He stopped eating first. I'd make his favorite meals, lasagna, pot roast, homemade pizza, and he'd push the food around his plate until I gave up. Then he stopped sleeping. I'd hear him moving around his room at 2 in the morning, 3, 4. When I'd check on him, he'd be sitting on his bed in the dark, phone in his hands, reading the messages over and over like he was trying to memorize every cruel word. Why don't you turn it off? I asked him one night, sitting down beside him on the bed. Because they're right, he whispered. Everyone thinks I did it. The school thinks I did it. Even if they never prove it, everyone will always think I'm a thief. I don't think that. I know you didn't do this. You're my mom. You have to say that. No, Leo. I say it because it's true. I know you. This isn't who you are. But my words felt hollow even to me. Because what good was my belief against the weight of an entire school's condemnation? What good was a mother's faith when the world had already passed judgment? By Thursday, Leo had stopped leaving his room except to use the bathroom. He'd sit on his bed, staring at the wall with this hollow, empty look in his eyes that absolutely broke my heart into pieces. I'd seen that look before, years ago, in the mirror after my husband died. It was the look of someone who'd given up, someone who'd stopped fighting. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't. Leo had always been a good kid. Not perfect, but good. When he was 7, he'd found a wallet in the grocery store parking lot with $40 inside. He insisted we turn it in to customer service, even though I'd told him we could keep the money if no one claimed it. When he was 12, he'd driven his bike across town in the rain to return a video game he'd accidentally been given for free when the store clerk forgot to scan it. He'd once spent his entire allowance buying supplies for a homeless man he'd seen downtown, coming home with no money but a smile that lit up his whole face. This was not a kid who would steal $5,000 from his school, but the school didn't care about any of that. They wanted a quick resolution, a neat answer they could present to angry parents and donors. Leo was convenient. He had access, he had opportunity, and most importantly, he didn't have the social capital to fight back. No powerful parents, no important connections, no football trophies or academic awards that made him valuable enough to protect. The expulsion hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday. 1 week to prove his innocence, or my son's life would be permanently derailed. A theft charge, an expulsion on his record, his college applications destroyed before he'd even finished junior year. Everything he'd worked for gone. I spent that weekend barely sleeping, trying to figure out what to do. I called lawyers, but they all said the same thing. Without evidence, there was nothing to fight. The school had the right to expel students for theft, and unless we could prove someone else took the money, Leo's denials wouldn't matter. So I started thinking about who else could have taken it. Who else had access to that office? I made lists, drew diagrams, tried to map out everyone who might have been in the building that weekend. Teachers had keys. Administrators had keys. Custodial staff had keys. But the school wasn't interested in investigating any of them. They had their scapegoat. Then, on Sunday afternoon, I saw something that made me stop cold. I'd gone to the grocery store to pick up a few things, trying to maintain some semblance of normal routine, even though everything felt like it was falling apart. And there, in the parking lot, I saw Coach Davis climbing off a brand new motorcycle. A beautiful machine, all gleaming chrome and black leather, the kind that costs serious money. He was wearing a designer watch too, something expensive and flashy that caught the sunlight as he pulled off his helmet. Coach Davis, the beloved football coach, the one who'd been teaching at Jefferson High for 15 years, who everyone loved, who showed up at every school event and volunteered for every committee. The same Coach Davis who was always complaining about money, who'd spent the last 3 years telling anyone who'd listen about his mortgage problems, his credit card debt, how teachers were so underpaid he could barely make ends meet. And now he was wearing a watch that probably cost more than his monthly salary and riding a motorcycle that had to have set him back at least $15,000. I stood there in that parking lot, grocery bags in my hands, and felt something click into place in my mind. It was too convenient, too coincidental. The timing was too perfect, but I couldn't just accuse him, not without proof. The school had already made up their minds once, and they'd chosen wrong. If I went to Principal Hendricks with nothing but suspicions and observations, he'd dismiss me as a desperate mother grasping at straws. I needed something concrete, something undeniable. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how to prove what I suspected. How do you catch a thief who's already gotten away with it? How do you prove someone took money that's already gone? And then, around 3 in the morning, an idea came to me. It was risky. It was probably crazy, but it might actually work. The next morning, I started making phone calls. I organized a bake sale to raise money for Leo's legal defense. I made sure everyone knew about it, especially the staff. I posted flyers in the teacher's lounge, sent emails to the school distribution list, made announcements on the parent Facebook group. I emphasized that we were accepting cash donations, that every little bit would help, that we needed the community's support in this difficult time. I made sure Coach Davis knew about it. I personally handed him a flyer, looking him right in the eyes as I explained how much legal fees cost, how devastating this was for our family, how grateful we'd be for any support. He smiled at me with what looked like genuine sympathy. Of course, Mrs. Patterson. I'll definitely stop by. Leo's a good kid. I'm sure this will all get sorted out. The lie came so easily to him, so smoothly, and I smiled back and thanked him, even though I want to scream. The night before the bake sale, I drove to a spy shop downtown. Yes, those actually exist. It was tucked into a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation office, and it sold all sorts of surveillance equipment, hidden cameras, and security devices. The guy behind the counter looked bored until I explained what I needed. Invisible fluorescent powder, I said. The kind that shows up under blacklight. He perked up. You trying to catch someone? Something like that. He sold me a small container of the powder and a portable blacklight. This stuff is great, he explained. You dust it on whatever you want to track. Gets all over their hands when they touch it. Sticks there for days, really gets into the skin oils. Soap and water won't get all off. They need to basically scrub their hands raw to remove every trace. And it's invisible until you shine the black light on it. Completely invisible. They won't know it's there. I felt like I was in a spy movie, but this was real. This was my son's life, his future, his entire world hanging in the balance. If this didn't work, I had no other plan, no other ideas. This was it. The bake sale was on Tuesday afternoon, right after school. I'd baked for 2 days straight. Cookies, brownies, cupcakes, lemon bars, everything I could think of. Other parents contributed too, and we set up tables in the school courtyard with all our goods displayed. But the real preparation had happened that morning. I'd carefully dusted the inside of our cash box with the fluorescent powder. Not too much, just enough to coat the bills and coins. Enough to transfer to someone's hands if they reached inside. I wore gloves while I did it, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out my chest. The sale started at 3 o'clock and people actually showed up. More than I'd expected. Parents who felt bad for Leo, students who weren't part of the online mob, even some teachers who seemed uncomfortable with how quickly the school had rushed to judgment. We sold out of baked goods in the first hour and raised almost $300 in cash donations. Coach Davis showed up around 4 o'clock. He bought some cookies, chatted with a few parents, played the part of the concerned teacher perfectly. He even put a $20 bill in our donation jar, making sure people saw him do it. Making sure I saw him do it. Hang in there, Mrs. Patterson, he said, his hand on my shoulder in a gesture that probably looked comforting to anyone watching. The truth always comes out eventually. I wanted to vomit, but I smiled and thanked him. At 5 o'clock, we started packing up. I made a show of counting the money loudly, announcing the total to everyone nearby. $347. Every little bit helps. I was so grateful. Thank you all so much. Then I put all the cash in the box and set it on the table while I folded up the tablecloths. I made sure Coach Davis could see it. Made sure he was nearby. And then, right on cue, I pretended to remember something. Oh no, I left my phone in the car. I'll be right back. I walked away, leaving the cash box sitting there on the table. Unattended. Vulnerable. Perfect bait. I didn't actually go to my car. I ducked around the corner of the building where I could still see the table, where I could watch. My heart was racing so fast, I felt dizzy. This had to work. It had to. For a long moment, nothing happened. Coach Davis stood there talking to another teacher, seemingly paying no attention to the cash box. I started to worry that I'd been wrong, that my suspicions were just desperate paranoia, that I was about to humiliate myself and destroy any remaining credibility I had. But then the other teacher walked away, and Coach Davis glanced around. Casual, quick, making sure no one was watching. And then he moved. It was fast, practiced. He stepped to the table, opened the cash box, and pulled out a handful of bills. Stuffed them in his pocket. The whole thing took maybe 5 seconds. Then he walked away like nothing had happened, whistling softly to himself. I stood there shaking, my hands clenched into fists. I'd been right, and now I had him. I waited a few minutes before returning to the table. The cash box was lighter, obviously. I counted the money again, this time silently. $60 missing. He'd taken $60 from a fundraiser for the kid he'd framed. The audacity was staggering, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. I packed everything up, thanked the few remaining volunteers, and drove home with the cash box and my blacklight locked safely in my trunk. That night, I told Leo what I'd done, why I suspected, why I was planning. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Mom, you can't. What if you're wrong? What if it doesn't work? Then we're no worse off than we are now, I said. But Leo, I know I'm right. I know he took it. And tomorrow, everyone else is going to know too. But the assembly, everyone will be there. If you're wrong, if this doesn't work, I'll be even more humiliated. You won't be. I promise. Do you trust me? He was quiet for a long time. Then finally he nodded. Yeah, I trust you. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay in bed running through every possible scenario, every way this could go wrong. What if the powder hadn't transferred properly? What if Coach Davis had washed his hands too well? What if the black light didn't work? What if the school refused to let me speak? What if? But there was no backing out now. This was happening. The assembly was scheduled for 10 o'clock Wednesday morning. They were going to officially announce Leo's expulsion in front of the entire school, a warning to other students. students. A demonstration of consequences. They were going to destroy my son publicly, make an example of him, ruin his life to prove a point. Unless I stopped them. The auditorium was packed. Every student, every teacher, most of the administrative staff. They'd crammed over 1,000 people into a space designed for 800. Students sat in the aisles. Teachers lined the walls. Everyone wanted to see the thief get what he deserved. Leo stood on the stage looking absolutely destroyed. He'd barely slept in days, had barely eaten, and it showed. His face was pale and drawn, his eyes red-rimmed from crying, his shoulders hunched like he was trying to make himself as small as possible. My baby, my sweet, kind, honest boy who'd never hurt anyone, standing up there like a criminal while hundreds of people stared at him with judgment and contempt. Principal Hendricks stepped up to the microphone. He had papers in his hand, probably the formal expulsion notice. He started talking about integrity, about trust, about the serious consequences of theft. His voice echoed through the speakers, pompous and self-righteous. I was sitting in the third row. I made sure to get there early to get a good seat, close enough to reach the stage quickly, close enough to be heard. When Principal Hendricks paused to shuffle his papers, I stood up. "Leo isn't the thief," I said loudly. My voice cut through the murmuring crowd. "But the real thief is in this room right now." The auditorium went silent. Every head turned to look at me. Principal Hendricks's face went red. "Mrs. Patterson, sit down. This is not the time or place." "This is exactly the time and place," I interrupted, walking toward the stage. "You're about to expel my son for something he didn't do. You're about to ruin his life without any real evidence. So yes, this is absolutely the time." Security guards started moving toward me, but I kept walking. I climbed the steps to the stage before they could stop me. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Principal Hendricks said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "I have proof," I said. "Real proof of who actually took that money. Are you really going to throw me out before seeing it? In front of all these people? In front of the school board members I see sitting in the back row?" I hadn't actually known the school board was there until I'd walked in, but it was a lucky break. Principal Hendricks glanced back at them, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. He wanted to remove me, but doing it in front of the board, in front of 1,000 witnesses, when I was claiming to have evidence, that would look very bad for him. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "You have 2 minutes." I took the microphone from him. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "My son didn't take that money, but I know who did, and I can prove it right now in front of all of you." The crowd was absolutely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Yesterday, we held a bake sale to raise money for Leo's legal defense. We raised over $300, but someone stole $60 from our cash box. The same person who stole the prom fund money. The same person who's been letting my son take the blame for his crime. I pulled out my black light, holding it up so everyone could see. Before the bake sale, I dusted the inside of our cash box with invisible fluorescent powder. The kind that transfers to your hands when you touch it and doesn't wash off easily. The kind that only shows up under black light. Whoever stole from us yesterday has that powder all over their hands. And so does whoever stole the prom fund money, because it's the same person. "This is ridiculous," Principal Hendricks sputtered. "You can't just..." "Then you won't mind if I check your hands?" I said sweetly. "If you have nothing to hide." I shined the black light on his hands. "Clean. No fluorescence. See? Nothing. Now, I'm gonna walk through this auditorium and check everyone who had access to that activities office. Every teacher, every administrator, every staff member with a key. And we're gonna find out who really did this." I started walking down the stage steps into the audience. I checked Mrs. Chun, the prom committee advisor. Clean. I checked the assistant principal. Clean. I checked the school secretary. Clean. And then I walked down the center aisle to where Coach Davis was sitting in the front row. The beloved coach. The one everyone trusted. The one who'd framed a quiet, awkward kid because he thought no one would defend him. I shined the black light on his hands. They glowed bright green. Both palms. All his fingers. Between his knuckles. Unmistakable. Undeniable. The entire auditorium gasped. Someone screamed. Students started shouting. The noise was deafening. Coach Davis's face went white, then red. He stood up, tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. The evidence was literally on his hands, glowing in the dark for everyone to see. I can explain," he stammered. "Please do," I said, my voice cold. "Explain to all these people why you have fluorescent powder all over your hands. Explain why you stole from a fundraiser for the kid you framed. Explain why you destroyed my son's life to cover up your crime." He looked around wildly, like he was searching for an escape route, but there wasn't one. 1,000 people were staring at him, recording him on their phones, waiting for his answer, and then he broke. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, his voice cracking. "I just needed the money. I had debts, gambling debts. Bad people were threatening me. I thought if I took the prom fund money, no one would notice right away. I'd have time to pay back my debts and then replace the money before anyone knew. But then Mrs. Chun counted early, and Leo was there, and it was so easy to let him take the blame. He was just a kid. Nobody important. Nobody would care. The auditorium erupted. Students were screaming, crying, shouting obscenities. Teachers were on their feet. Parents were demanding answers. It was chaos. You ruined his life, I said, my voice somehow cutting through the noise. You destroyed a good kid's reputation, his future, his sense of safety, because you thought he was nobody important. Because you thought no one would defend him. Coach Davis was crying now, ugly sobs that shook his whole body. I am sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do. You could have told the truth, I said. You could have faced your consequences instead of making an innocent kid face them for you. Police officers were already moving through the crowd. Someone had called them. They took Coach Davis by the arms, and he didn't resist. Just kept crying and apologizing as they led him out of the auditorium in handcuffs. Students recorded every second of it, and I knew those videos would be all over social media within minutes. Principal Hendricks stood on the stage looking absolutely shell-shocked. The school board members were conferring in the back row. Mrs. Chun was crying, and Leo was standing in the middle of the stage, tears streaming down his face. But for the first time in a week, they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of relief, of vindication, of finally being able to breathe again. I walked back up onto the stage and pulled my son into my arms. He collapsed against me, sobbing, and I held him tight while the auditorium slowly settled into a stunned silence. I'm sorry, Principal Hendricks said quietly, approaching us. Mrs. Patterson, Leo, I'm so sorry. We should have investigated more thoroughly. We should have given you the benefit of the doubt. We failed you. Yes, I said simply. You did. There would be time later for formal apologies, for policy changes, for all the administrative cleanup. But right now, all that mattered was my son, safe in my arms, his name finally cleared. The assembly ended in chaos. Students mobbed Leo, apologizing, crying, tried to explain why they believed the accusations. Some of them meant it. Some of them were just trying to avoid being on the wrong side of the story now that the truth was out. Leo accepted their apologies with grace I didn't know he possessed. The messages on his phone changed overnight. The same kids who'd called him a thief were now calling him a hero. The same people who demanded his expulsion were now outraged on his behalf. It was sickening, really, how quickly people could switch sides. But Leo was kinder than me. He forgave them. Most of them, anyway. Coach Davis pleaded guilty to theft and fraud. Turned out he'd stolen from other places too, small amounts here and there that no one had noticed. He'd had a gambling problem for years, had been in debt to some very dangerous people, and had gotten desperate. He got 3 years in prison and a lifetime ban from working in education. The school implemented new financial oversight policies. Multiple people now had to be present for any cash counting. Security cameras were upgraded and actually maintained. And they created a new protocol for investigating theft accusations that required actual evidence before punishing students. Leo finished out the school year. Prom happened, though the theme had to be scaled back since they had to raise the money all over again. He didn't go. Said he'd had enough of school events for a while. I didn't blame him, but something had changed in him. He wasn't quite as quiet anymore. Wasn't quite as invisible. He'd learned that he mattered, that he was worth defending, that being quiet didn't mean being nobody. And I learned something too. I learned that a mother's instinct is worth trusting. That sometimes you have to fight for your kids, even when everyone tells you you're wrong. That justice doesn't always come easy, but it's worth pursuing anyway. On the last day of school, Leo came home with his yearbook. Students had written messages all over it, apologies and well wishes and promises to do better. He showed me one message in particular, written in careful handwriting on the inside cover. To Leo, I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I'm sorry I believed what everyone else believed instead of thinking for myself. You deserve better from all of us. Thank you for being strong enough to survive what we put you through. You're braver than any of us. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. Are you okay? I asked him. He thought about it for a long moment. Yeah, he said finally. I think I am. It still hurts, what they said, what they believed about me. But I know the truth now. Everyone knows the truth. And I have you. I'll always have you. Always, I promise. No matter what, I will always defend you. I will always fight for you. I will always believe in you. I know, Mom. I know. That summer, Leo got a job at the library. He started volunteering at a youth center. He made new friends, real friends who knew his story and admired how he'd handled it. He started to heal. And me? I started a support group for parents whose kids had been falsely accused of things at school. Turned out there were more of us than I'd realized. We met once a month, shared strategies, offered support, reminded each other that we weren't crazy for believing in our children. Sometimes the quietest person in the room has the loudest defender. And sometimes that defender is a mother who refuses to let her child be destroyed by lies, who trusts her instincts, who fights back with intelligence and determination and a black light from Spy Shop. Leo learned that he was worth defending, and I learned that I was capable of more than I'd ever imagined when it came to protecting my son. If you enjoyed this story, like and subscribe for more.